At my wedding rehearsal dinner, my brother clinked his glass and announced she's only marrying him because she can't land anyone better, even she knows it. Everyone laughed. I just sat there, smiling. Yesterday, I posted the video he forgot existed. Today, he's hiding from everyone. The night before my wedding was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. It was the rehearsal dinner, just close family and friends gathered in the back patio of a nice restaurant my fiancé had picked out. Twinkle lights overhead, soft music playing, and the kind of calm that comes right before a big day. It was the kind of moment you wanted to remember forever. And I will. But not for the right reasons. I remember sitting there, quietly holding my fiancé's hand under the table, feeling nervous and excited and just grateful. People were giving toasts. Her sister went first, funny, sweet, a little emotional. Then my best friend, who told a few embarrassing stories from college but ended it with a sincere blessing. My dad got up, raised his glass, and said how proud he was. I couldn't stop smiling. Then my brother stood up. I remember the clink of his glass with a fork, sharp and clear. The patio quieted. He smiled his signature smile. The one that always came before a punchline. I just want to say a few words about my younger brother, he began, his voice casual, light. You know, growing up, we all wondered what kind of woman would settle for someone like him. I mean, let's be real, he's not exactly the guy you picture when you hear Prince Charming. There were a few nervous chuckles. My fiancé stiffened beside me. But seriously, he continued, we're all just glad he found someone before turning 40. Some of us thought he'd end up marrying a dating app bot. So let's all raise our glasses to the man who finally convinced someone to say yes. The laughter was louder this time. I felt like the table dropped out from under me. He sat down like nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. I forced a smile. My hand gripped the base of my wine glass until my knuckles went white. That night when we got home, my fiancé asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. But something inside me shifted. That wasn't the first time my brother had done something like that. It was just the most public. And for the first time I realized I wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. He wanted to humiliate me? Fine. But he forgot something. A year ago he'd accidentally airdropped a voice memo to me. I'd saved it and never listened to it. I assumed it was nothing. But that night, while my fiancé slept, I opened it. His voice came through, laughing, bragging. I mean, she's hot, but come on. I'm not marrying her because I love her. She's just a good look on paper. And her dad's loaded. I'll stick around until I've got what I need. Then, who knows? I sat there, alone in the dark, listening to my brother talking about the woman he was supposed to marry in 2 months. I saved the file. Sent a copy to the cloud. I didn't even know what I would do with it yet. But I knew one thing. He picked the wrong day, the wrong place, and the wrong person to humiliate. And I was done staying quiet. The next morning, I woke up early. My fiancée was still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. I slipped out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. The voice memo was still there. I played it again, this time through headphones, listening carefully word by word. It wasn't just the cruelty of what he said, it was the smugness. The pride. Like he thought he was untouchable. My brother had always been the charming one. The funny one. The one people instinctively trusted. Me? I was quiet. Studious. The dependable one. The one who got overlooked. That dynamic had played out since childhood. He pushed boundaries, broke rules, made mistakes. And somehow he always landed on his feet. I was the one who followed the rules, kept my head down, worked hard, and got laughed at. I thought adulthood would change that. I thought getting engaged to an incredible woman, building a life, working hard, it would finally earn respect. But standing there at the rehearsal dinner, being the punchline in front of everyone I cared about, it reminded me that some people never grow out of old roles. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet the thoughts racing through my head. Anger, embarrassment, resentment, and under all that resolve. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. First, I made a copy of the recording on a USB drive. Then I wrote down a list of people, his fiancée, her father, a few of our extended family members, his boss. I wasn't sure yet who would hear it, but I needed options. I wasn't going to act out of rage. I wanted to be smart, careful, precise. My fiancée noticed I was distracted over breakfast. Still thinking about last night, she asked. I nodded. Yeah, but I'm okay. She looked at me closely. You know you don't have to pretend, right? That wasn't okay. What he said. I gave her a small smile. I know. I'm not pretending. Just processing. She reached for my hand. You don't deserve that. I know. We left for the venue after lunch to finish setup. My brother showed up late, of course, acting like nothing happened. He winked at me across the room as if it was all some harmless joke. I smiled back, but something in my eyes must have changed because for the first time in a long time he looked unsure. That night I sat down and drafted a letter. It was addressed to his fiancée. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I needed the words to be ready. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I didn't want to be the one to tell you. But I think you deserve to know the truth before you make a permanent decision with someone who doesn't respect you. Then I copied the audio file onto another drive and sealed it in an envelope. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about payback. This was about drawing a line. About not letting people like him walk through life unchallenged, hurting people because they can. The day of the wedding arrived. My nerves were high, but so was my focus. I stood there at the altar hand in hand with my bride, watching the faces in the crowd. My brother was in the second row, smiling like nothing was wrong. But I knew. And soon, so would everyone else. The ceremony went on without a hitch. From the outside, it looked like a perfect wedding. My bride was radiant, our vows were heartfelt, the guests clapped at all the right moments. My brother gave no further speeches. He smiled, nodded, posed for photos like nothing had happened the night before. But I didn't forget. That night after the reception, when the last guests had left and my wife had finally fallen asleep in our hotel suite, I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope still in my jacket pocket. The USB drive was light, but it felt like a weight pressing against my ribs. I took it out, turned it over in my hand. For the 100th time, I played the audio on my phone. His voice, smug and slurring from what I now guessed was a night of drinking. She's just a good look on paper. I mean, once her dad signs over that property, I'm out. There was laughter in the background. A friend maybe. Or worse, my cousin, the one who always took his side in everything. I listened again. Not to confirm. I knew what I'd heard. I just wanted to feel it again. The anger. The sick twist in my stomach. The steady focus that came after. I'd spent my life being the bigger person. Letting him take the spotlight. Laughing off his comments. But this wasn't a childhood prank or some drunken rant at a birthday party. This was betrayal, targeted and calculated. And it wasn't just about me. It was about her. His fiancée. I couldn't stand by while she married someone like that. Not anymore. The next morning I texted my brother. Me asterisk, brunch still on at mom and dad's? Him asterisk, of course. Be there at 11. Bring the wife. She's part of the circus now, winky face. Typical. Always with the jokes. Always pushing that boundary just enough to make you question whether he was serious. My wife noticed I was quiet on the way there. I told her I was just tired from the big day. She squeezed my hand and smiled. You made it through. Now comes the easy part. I hoped she was right. We pulled into my parents' driveway just as my brother and his fiancée were getting out of their car. She looked beautiful, like always, fresh-faced, excited, wearing a soft floral dress. She smiled at me warmly. Waved. My stomach twisted. She had no idea. Inside, the house was filled with chatter and the smell of bacon. My mom had gone all out for tatas, muffins, fruit trays, mimosas. It looked like a magazine brunch spread. Everyone was cheerful, still riding high from the wedding. My brother held court in the kitchen, already on his second mimosa, retelling stories from the night before. He caught my eye. Winked. Raised his glass. I nodded. Come on, he said, clapping my shoulder. Let's have a toast for the newlyweds. You made it, man. Didn't think you had it in you. There were laughs. A few chuckles from cousins. I saw my aunt elbow her husband. They thought it was just teasing. That same old banter. But this time I didn't laugh. This time I looked him in the eye and said, we all grow up eventually. Some of us faster than others. He tilted his head, the smile faltering just a little. Easy, bro, don't get soft on me now. The moment passed. People went back to eating. The noise returned. But I knew he felt it. That crack in his confidence. The edge in my voice. Later, when most people had filtered into the backyard or gone for seconds, I pulled his fiancée aside. Can we talk for a second? She looked surprised but nodded. Sure. Everything okay? We stepped into the sunroom just off the kitchen. The door muffled the rest of the house. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. I didn't know how to start. My throat was dry. There's something you should hear, I said finally, holding out the USB. She frowned. What is this? I didn't plan to get involved. But I think you deserve to know what kind of man you're about to marry. She looked at the drive, then back at me. Her face paled. Is this what I think it is? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I can't promise what you'll decide afterward, I added. But at least you'll be making that choice with the truth. I handed her the envelope with the letter. Her hands shook slightly. I don't want to ruin anything, I said more softly now. But I won't let him keep lying to everyone. Especially you. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she nodded once, pressed her lips together, took a deep breath. Thank you, she said quietly. We left shortly after that. My brother tried to pull me aside before we left. I told him I was tired, that we'd catch up later. His fiancée didn't say much either. But the next day, she didn't show up to their apartment. And the day after that, my brother called me 6 times. I didn't answer. He sent one final text. What did you do? I didn't reply. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. For once, he didn't get to control the narrative. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the quiet one. I felt powerful. I felt free. And I wasn't done yet. 2 days later, I got a message from her. Short but direct. Thank you for telling me. I left. I'm with my sister now. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I needed to get out. I stared at it for a long time before responding. I'm sorry it had to be like this. You didn't deserve what he did. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to, but I felt something lift. I didn't just protect myself. I protected someone else from a lifetime of lies. And yet, that wasn't the end. I started thinking about the others he'd manipulated, humiliated, controlled over the years. The ex-girlfriends he'd lied to. The people he'd thrown under the bus to get ahead at work. The small betrayals no one ever called out. He wasn't just my brother. He was a pattern. And I had the one thing that could finally disrupt it. Truth. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. Not from my brother, he kept calling, texting, reaching out through family members. But from me. I said nothing. I wanted him to sit in it. In the uncertainty, in the vacuum of control he was no longer allowed to hold. He left voicemails. Angry, defensive, pleading. Whatever you think you know, it's not what it looks like. She's overreacting. I was drunk. It was a joke. You're ruining my life over some stupid recording. But none of it sounded like regret. Just fear. Fear of exposure. Fear that his charm had finally worn off. On the 4th day, I got a message from my cousin. The same one I suspected was laughing in the background of that voice memo. Dude, what the hell happened? He's losing it. You really going nuclear? I didn't answer him either. Because I wasn't going nuclear. I was being methodical. I'd spent those 3 days organizing everything. Timelines. Backup files. Screenshots of texts I remembered he sent to people asking for favors, lying to get out of commitments, talking behind friends' backs. I reached out to one of his ex-girlfriends, someone he ghosted after a 2-year relationship. I asked her carefully if she'd ever felt manipulated by him. Her reply was immediate. All the time. Why? I told her I was documenting a pattern. I asked her if she'd be willing to talk. She said yes. I didn't know what the end goal was yet. I wasn't planning to post anything online or go public. But I knew he needed to be confronted by the damage he left behind. Not just to others, but to who he could have been. My brother had potential. Real potential. He was smart, likable, fast on his feet. But he never did the hard work. He never looked inward. And now that failure was coming for him. On the 5th day, I finally picked up the phone. His voice came through instantly. Jesus, finally. What the hell is going on? What did you say to her? I didn't say anything to her, I replied calmly. I let you speak for yourself. You just didn't know I was recording. He was silent. Then you had no right. You had no right to humiliate me in front of our family. To treat your fiancé like a pawn. To walk through life like people are disposable. He let out a bitter laugh. So what, you think you're some kind of hero now? No. Just someone who finally stopped letting you write the story. Click. He hung up. I didn't call back. Because the story was already moving forward. And I wasn't interested in his version anymore. Over the next week, the ripple effect spread faster than I'd anticipated. It started small, family gossip, questions from relatives, a few raised eyebrows at brunches I wasn't invited to. Then came the phone calls. A few of our cousins wanted to know what really happened. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough. She made the right decision, I said. That's all I'll say. The ex-girlfriend I'd spoken to messaged me again. She'd told a mutual friend about what I was doing, and now a second woman, another one of my brother's exes, wanted to talk. Then a third. I wasn't chasing them down. They came on their own. Each of them had stories. Lies, gaslighting, cheating. The common thread? He always made them feel like it was their fault. I started compiling the stories. I wasn't sure why yet. Maybe it was for documentation. Maybe it was for his future partner, whoever she might be. Or maybe I just needed to see it all laid out. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That this wasn't petty revenge. That I wasn't alone in how he treated me. because that's what it had always been. Loneliness. A kind of emotional isolation that came from being the quiet brother. The reliable one. The background character in his comedy show. Even my parents had fallen for it. That's just how he is, they'd say. He means well. He didn't. And now I had proof. One night I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was our old high school history teacher. "Hey, this is Mr. Delaney. I don't know what's going on between you and your brother, but he called me tonight drunk and yelling. I think he's spiraling. Just figured you should know." I sat with that message for a long time. It would have been easy to feel guilty. To call him back. To offer comfort. To play the peacemaker like I always had. But that guilt wasn't mine to carry anymore. The next morning I went to visit my parents. I hadn't spoken to them much since the wedding. They'd noticed the tension, but I hadn't filled them in. My mom opened the door with a smile that quickly faded. "We heard," she said. "Heard what?" I asked. She glanced behind her like she was making sure no one else was listening. "About the recording. About her leaving him. Did you hear why?" I asked. She hesitated. "He said it was a misunderstanding. That you misinterpreted something he said when he was drunk." "Did you ask to hear the recording?" "No. I pulled out my phone, opened the file, played it. My dad walked into the room halfway through, stood there in stunned silence. When it ended, I said nothing, just watched their faces. My mom covered her mouth. My dad sank into a chair. "How long have you had this?" he asked. "A year." My mom shook her head slowly. "Why would he say something like that? Why would he?" "Because he thinks people are tools. He always has. You just didn't want to see it." To their credit, they didn't defend him. Not this time. That night, my dad called me again. He sounded tired. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said, "for not seeing it sooner. For not listening." "Thanks," I said. There was a pause. "He needs help." "Yeah," I said. "But he has to want it. And right now, he didn't. I wasn't sure if he ever would." It's been 3 weeks since the wedding. Since the toast. Since the recording changed everything. My wife and I returned to our normal routine faster than I expected. She's been my rock through all of it. She didn't ask for updates, didn't push for answers. She just let me breathe, let me process. Some nights we'd sit in silence, others we'd talk for hours. But she never once told me to let it go. She knew sometimes you don't heal by forgetting. You heal by facing it. My brother hasn't called again. Not since the night he hung up on me. He's disappeared from group chats. Stopped showing up at family events. Word is he's been crashing at a friend's place across town. Our parents tried to visit him once. He didn't answer the door. I can't lie, part of me still waits for the other shoe to drop. For a confrontation. For an apology. For another petty retaliation. But so far, there's only silence. And in that silence, something new has started to grow. Peace. I've reconnected with people I'd pushed aside while dealing with all the family drama. Coworkers I'd always said no to after work drinks. Old friends I hadn't seen in years. I started therapy, something I never thought I needed. But unpacking all of this layer by layer has been like peeling away the fog that clouded most of my life. Therapy surprised me in ways I didn't expect. I didn't realize how much I'd internalized over the years. The need to keep peace. The fear of speaking up. The belief that my worth came from being the one who tolerated, absorbed, adapted. Session by session, I started recognizing patterns, not just in my relationship with my brother, but with other people too. Colleagues who leaned on me but never reciprocated. Friends who always expected me to compromise. Even in the way I second-guessed every decision I made, like I was waiting for someone else to approve. I didn't want to live like that anymore. Last week, I got an email. From her. His ex-fiancée. It was short, but it stopped me cold. "Thank you again. I'm doing better. I moved out of state to be near my sister. Started a new job. I hope you're okay too. What you did, it mattered." I stared at those words for a long time. Underscore it mattered. Underscore. Not just because it stopped something toxic before it got worse, but because it was the first time someone said it out loud. That doing the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, had value. That breaking the silence made a difference. She didn't owe me that message. But I'm glad she sent it. Sometimes I think about what her life would have been like if I hadn't spoken up. If she had gone through with the wedding. If she'd built a life with someone who saw her as a means to an end. That thought haunts me more than anything else. My parents have been different lately too. Quieter. Less quick to make excuses when his name comes up. They still love him, I know that. But I think finally they're seeing him for who he really is. Or at least, they're trying to. My dad even asked me over to help with some house repairs, something he usually asked my brother to do. We fixed the front porch light together. Didn't say much. But when I was leaving, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm proud of the man you've become." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until he said it. I also started journaling, another suggestion from my therapist. At first, I felt ridiculous. What was I going to write? Dear Diary, today I almost told my boss to go to hell. But slowly, the pages filled. Some with anger. Some with grief. Some with memories I hadn't realized were still lingering. Like the time in high school when my brother blamed me for something he did and I got detention. Or the time he made a joke at my expense during a job interview dinner and cost me a position I'd worked hard to secure. These moments weren't isolated. They were part of a pattern. And writing them down gave me a way to see that. To believe myself. Will things ever go back to normal? I don't think so. But maybe that's okay. Because maybe normal was broken. And now, for the first time, I get to build something better. Something honest. Something mine. I've started setting boundaries in other parts of my life, too. Saying no when I need to. Speaking up when I feel disrespected. It's uncomfortable at times, I won't pretend it's not. But each time I do it, I feel a little lighter. A little stronger. Last Sunday, my mom invited us over for dinner. Just the four of us, my parents, my wife, and me. No mention of my brother. We ate roast chicken, drank wine, and talked about mundane things, new grocery stores, the weather, TV shows. But there was a current beneath it, a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed. At one point, my mom said, "I wish he'd come home. But I understand why he hasn't." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to talk about him in past or future tense. Right now, I was focused on the present. After dinner, my dad walked us to the car. As we stood in the driveway, he looked at me and said, "You know, it takes guts to do what you did. I don't know if I would have had the strength." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Some days I still feel conflicted. There's a part of me that mourns the relationship I wish we'd had. The bond between brothers that some people talk about like it's sacred. That wasn't our story, and I've come to accept that. Sometimes you have to let go of the version of someone you created in your head. The version you hoped they'd be. It hurts, but it's honest, and it's freeing. This week, I framed a photo from the wedding. It's me and my wife, laughing at something, arms wrapped around each other. In the background, everyone is clapping. It's blurry, a little off-center, but it's real. I put it on my desk at home, not because it's perfect, but because it reminds me of the moment I chose myself, of the moment I stopped being quiet and started living out loud.